Welcome to the Book Bungalow's virtual evening for science fiction and fantasy. Each year, new sci-fi and fantasy authors and illustrators are discovered through the annual L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers and Illustrators of the Future contest, the biggest science fiction and fantasy awards program, I think, in the world. We are pleased to present 4 of these winners virtually tonight as they talk about the stories and illustration that make up a part of volume 38. There's volume 38, which is available for purchase either online through our website or in our bookstore. And I have put the link to order it through our website in the chat room. In the past, we have also featured its editor and longtime judge, David Farland, who is a personal friend of mine and one of our greatest supporters here. He lives locally, but he sadly passed away earlier this year. Nevertheless, the book he worked on still bears his name and also features bonus short stories plus art and writing tips from Frank Herbert, Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson, and Diane Dillon. With us tonight are 3 writers and 1 illustrator. ZT Bright. ZT, why don't you say hi so people can see you?
Come off mute. Hello.
There
hello.
you are. There's ZT. He is an author in deep, like really deep, cover as a financial planner. He lives outside of Salt Lake City with his wife, who he says is far more talented creatively than he is. There are 4 perfect children, 3 ducks, 2 dogs, and 1 cat. And yes, it's as loud as it sounds. When not writing or working, he can be found cooking, supporting his kids at their various activities, or enjoying the outdoors, hiking, backpacking, fishing, biking, and so forth. ZT was the winner of the inaugural Mike Resnick Memorial Award and was published in Galaxy's Edge magazine in 2021. He writes anything speculative, ranging from sci-fi short stories to middle grade fantasy novels. Writers of the Future is his second sale. His story, The Magic Book of Accidental City Destruction, a book wizard's guide, was inspired by the power of the internet and social media to both disseminate information and create social divisions like never before in history. It seems to him we all need to examine our relationship with these tools before it's too late. Brittany Rainston, can you say hi, Brittany?
Hello.
There she is. Grew up as the only girl in a family with 4 brothers. She's reversing that trend with her own children, 4 girls and 1 boy. In 2010, Brittany graduated from Brigham Young University, Idaho, with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. She has worked in both medical and surgical and rehabilitation specialties, although she currently enjoys working as a stay-at-home mom. Throughout childhood, Brittany wrote many poems and stories, but lost her spark upon entering college. After having her 3rd child, she sought a creative outlet, and her passion for writing reignited. Once she found the Writers of the Future contest, Brittany decided to enter every quarter until she won. And after 16, talk about persistent, after 16 consecutive entries, she did. Brittany's first published story appeared in Deep Magic, spring 2021, and was republished in The Best of Deep Magic, Volume 2. She was published in Writers of the Future, Volume 37 as a finalist, and now in Writers of the Future, Volume 38, as a contest winner. Brittany lives with her husband and children near the Snake River in Idaho, where she swears it looks like for nearly half the year. She has many pairs of fuzzy socks. About her story, Brittany shared the following. And her story is entitled The Last Dying Season. After a dramatic health scare, I reflected much on what mattered most to me, as well as my greatest fears. My biggest concern wasn't actually dying. We're going to have to hear more about your health scare. But leaving my children without a mother. This concern, coupled with musings on the value of life, spawned the characters and ethical dilemmas within The Last Dying Season. Mike Jack Stumbos, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Mike. Are you there?
Yes, I'm very here.
Okay. Is it Stumbos?
You were pronouncing that correctly. Stumbos, yep.
Okay. Is a speculative fiction author disguised as a believably normal teacher, living with his wife and their parrot in Seattle. What grade do you teach, or are you a university professor?
High school. So I am plugged anywhere between 9th and 12th grade.
Okay.
And actually, at the moment, I'm no longer living in Seattle. So when I released that, I'm now across the country, clear on the other side in Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He grew up with 3 brothers and over 40 first cousins, whom he enlisted as test audiences and participants for his imagined adventures, often reenacted with cardboard props or Star Wars action figures. His love of storytelling brought him to the stage as a musical theater actor, the role-playing table as a game master, and a career trajectory to teach English and theater. In the summer of 2019, however, Mike made his writing passion a priority and once again became a student, attending workshops, practicing daily, and braving the story submission gauntlet. Mike's work has since appeared in several collections, including his first pro sale in Galactic Stew and a publication alongside a personal hero in Hold Your Fire, Stories Celebrating the Creative Spark. Who is that hero?
That would be KJA, Kevin J. Anderson, who runs the Superstars writing seminars. The very first full novel-length novel that I read was one of Kevin's Star Wars books. Okay. And so I've grown up with that, and then when I had a chance to learn from him, that was awesome. And then being published alongside him, also awesome.
And shortly after he was named a Writers of the Future winner, Mike's space opera series, This Fine Crew, was picked up by Chris Kennedy Publishing for many continuing adventures. Congratulations. The idea for his story, The Squid is My Brother, emerged as a curiosity. How to take something from cosmic horror and make it as endearing as a family member. Even more importantly, Mike wrote this story shortly after the schools had closed due to COVID in 2020 as a young student's first-person account of transferring into a bizarre new environment, fearing the unknown, and learning about humanity. Finally, illustrator Nick Jizba, am I pronouncing that right, Nick?
Yep, you got it right.
Okay. And I have somebody on here who wants to know the derivation of that surname. Where do you come from originally?
It's Czech, and it used to be, I think it was Jizba in Czech, not Jizba, so it got changed during immigration, but yeah, it's Jizba now.
Okay. Nick was born in Bloomington, Indiana in 1984, but he spent most of his life living in Nebraska. Are you still in Nebraska? Oh, you're muted.
I am still in Nebraska, sorry.
Okay. He has always spent time drawing, but didn't really consider art as a career option. Losing a safe construction job in the 2008 recession pushed Nick to develop his art into a career. He attended ITT Tech Institute for Game Design, focusing on 3D modeling and level design. In school, he ended up doing most of the concept art and sketching for group projects, and that developed into a passion for digital painting. Nick has continued to learn by taking a variety of online classes, taking on the occasional freelance illustration, and working on personal illustrations that he sells at conventions. I need to. He's currently working on his first book, The Sower. Is this a novel, or is this illustrating for something?
It's an art book, so I'm writing like little paragraph stories to go with illustrations. So it's going to be more illustrations than writing, but it's going to be like maybe 5 or 10 pages of actual writing and like 40 pages of illustrations.
Okay. Okay. Welcome to all four of you. I'm going to get things started by posing some questions to all of you. And if those in the audience will please mute themselves. And if you have questions that I don't cover, please put them in the chat room. And I will try and get to them. First of all, though, I alluded to it in my introduction, but what is Writers and Illustrators of the Future? How did you hear about it? And what has the contest done for your career? And I want to start with Brittany.
Hello. So I heard about Writers of the Future several years ago when I was taking a class on how to get published. And one of the things they talked about in that class was, you know, everyone wants to get published for different reasons, and what are your goals? And so I guess I decided I wanted to get traditionally published and to get noticed by an agent. And they were like, one of the best ways to do that is to try and win some contests or get published in reputable magazines before you go in with a novel. And so I decided to research, and this was the first thing that popped up. Yeah, I really wanted to go for that after I heard of it.
Okay. How about you, ZT?
Yeah, so I guess there were a number of questions kind of rolled in there. So what is the contest? What does it mean to me? I mean, any particular direction you want me to take this question?
When did you first hear about it?
When did I first hear about it? Yeah, so it was probably about 7-ish years ago. I had started becoming a little more serious and starting to write, trying to get published, and looking for places to submit, and learned about Writers of the Future just it's either through just searching or Google searches, or maybe through what's the name of the podcast? The Writing Excuses podcast.
Sorry about that. And what has it done for your career, winning it?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to overstate what Writers of the Future has done for me writing wise, because any success I've had so far is in some way due to my involvement with the contest. Just the fact that it helped me continue to submit something on a regular basis, having that kind of quarterly aim. I think, you know, as a new writer, having something that felt like it was a little bit more of a level playing field. You know, it was blind, and it was relatively newer writers. You know, I wasn't going against a stable of professional writers that, you know, pro magazines had. You know,
how many times did you enter?
I purposely didn't keep count, but it was I entered at least once every year for 7 years, and
okay,
usually it was more than once per year.
Okay, how about you, Mike?
Well, I first heard about the volume long before I knew that it was a contest. So I actually encountered the Writers of the Future collections as a student and then as a teacher, and I used them as convenient collections of short stories to teach from, because, you know, they were usually school appropriate and they had some kind of moral to them, and usually they started fast enough that I could get students interested and engaged, and we could use them as like, this is going to be a sample lesson on setting or a sample lesson on character. I did that for actually middle school to start with, and then brought it into high school. And then way later found out that it was a contest. And my first exposure to the contest was being told that it was like this massive thing where thousands of people enter and only 3 are chosen. And I was like, oh, well, that's very, very low odds. I'm going to not enter. And that was my approach to it for years, because that was the only thing that I was given. And then, you know, some of the comments that I had heard about it were like, basically made it seem like it was too far out of range for me to have a go at. But sometime later, I reheard about it from, I'm going to say, the right person who was able to contextualize it in terms of like, well, keep in mind when you're submitting to this, you're submitting anonymously, so they don't know who you are, and also you can only submit if you haven't already published X number of things. So if you haven't had more than 3 pro-rate short story sales, you can't enter. And I was like, oh, so you mean this isn't against like, tens of thousands of people who are already best-selling authors and people know their names and they're going to put them into this volume? Well, that's very different. So I changed my tactic, and by that point, I was also writing short stories regularly and just sending them off to a bunch of different places. So by the time I started entering Writers of the Future, I was not actually writing any stories specifically for it. I was writing like the best science fiction stories that I could about concepts that I found intriguing. And then I was like, cool, I have a story that fits into the word count. It's a wide range of word count. Might as well send it off and see what happens. And my first submission was a semifinalist. And I'd met Dave before. So Dave Farland, I'd met him in person at a writing conference, because this is going to sound very bizarre. So I was in an anthology with him, and I didn't know his name is Dave Farland to Dave Wolverton. I had read some of his Star Wars books as Dave Wolverton, but I did not associate the two, and I really should have done, but I didn't. And so my first experience was like, I heard his name in conversation and was talking to him. I was like, it's like, oh, it's really nice to meet you. We're in an anthology together. I loved your story. And like, that was my first interaction with Dave Farland. And I didn't say anything super dumb, but but I looking back, I probably should have known more of who I was talking to and had a better idea of how to address. But the first story that I sent in was a semifinalist. Dave got in touch with me. We chatted about it, and I was like, okay, well, this is an actual possibility. And so then I just, kept entering. And it was on the third one that I won. So it was a semifinalist, an honorable mention, and then first place. And that was a very cool process.
That's great. And what is the word count that you have to get under?
Okay, somebody's probably gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think currently it is under 17,000. But realistically speaking, it sounds like a lot of the averages are going to be somewhere between like a 4 and 9. Like if you can get something that feels like a very solid story between 4 and 9,000 words, usually with something that has a strong science fiction or fantasy element in the first page or two, so that it's very clear. It's like, yes, this is our kind of science fiction fantasy, and it's going to be engaging. Those are things that I've heard. I don't know I assume there are exceptions and wiggle rooms all over the place, but those are the things that I've heard and that I'm going to just repeat here.
Okay. Nick, as an illustrator, where did you hear about the contest?
Someone I met in one of those art classes that I mentioned in the bio, actually won the contest about 4 years ago. So I started submitting sort of on and off ever since I saw him get into the book. And part of it was he's just a little bit further ahead of me as an illustrator in terms of his progression. So I'm just like, I should start submitting to see when I start getting to a more professional level. And so I've been doing that for like a lot of contests. And yeah, this
has it had an impact? Has winning had an impact?
A little bit. Like I met Blake, who was one of the people that invites the guest to FanX. And so he sort of his talk sort of inspired me to apply to more conventions. So like this year I was able to go part-time since then, just selling art at conventions.
Great. Okay. And what was the Hollywood experience like for all of you? Just go ahead, start, Nick.
Oh, it was pretty crazy. I mean, I travel a little bit for conventions, but yeah, it's always cool just to be it's just more fun being around all the other artists, just because it's always fun to hang out with, like-minded illustrators that are sort of on the same path, because in Omaha, it's hard to find people that are sort of following a similar path. Like you can get people that are also, pursuing art professionally, but not necessarily in sci-fi and fantasy illustration. So it was kind of fun.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I definitely enjoyed the gala and being able to, get all fancy, go up on stage, get some pictures with some very celebrated authors. That was very fun. Yeah, I think it was a very enjoyable experience. I would recommend it to people who have the opportunity to do so.
Okay. Brittany? Did you enjoy dressing up?
Well, So I actually didn't make it to the event this year because my baby was due 2 weeks before the event. So, but I did get to go last year because I was finals last year.
Okay.
In October, and I will say the what I enjoyed about that the most, it was fun dressing up. That was a cool thing about the contest. That's fun for me. But but I also really enjoyed doing the 24-hour story challenge thing. Just that I didn't get to do it with these guys. I got to do it with the group prior. But to me, that is one of the coolest things that Writers of the Future offers. And just speaking with all the luminaries in the field, it's incredible.
Mm-hmm. ZT, would you agree?
I would agree. Yeah. On all counts, it was great to be with like-minded people and creators and people that I wish I got to associate with more than I do in my day job, and getting to make hopefully some good lifetime friends. And the 24-hour story was great as well. Working.
Tell me about the 24-hour. Is this the workshop?
Yeah. So during the workshop, we take 24 hours. We break midday one day and we start writing. And by that time, the following day, we have to submit a short story to them.
Wow.
And I think it's a little bit intimidating, but also, for me, having, the day job and the family and just a lot of stuff going on, getting a full free 24 hours to do nothing but write was a dream. So it was really fun.
That's great. Okay. Okay, let's start with ZT and your story. Tell us a little bit about your story to begin with, for those who have not read it, without giving things away.
Yeah, sure. So my story is secondary world fantasy. It's set kind of a Arabian Nights sort of setting, and it's got book wizards with magic books, and the concept is the main character who is a book wizard finds a couple of young brothers who are having a hard time with their relationship, and they want to kind of repair and help that relationship while also using some of the problematic magic books. And hijinks ensue, and the city is in mortal peril by the end of the story.
Okay. Now, you said this story was inspired by the power of the internet and social media to disseminate information and create social divisions. So what was going on in the country, particularly or abroad, when the idea for this story began to gel in your mind? Yeah,
this was very much, a pandemic baby, right? It was the whole concept came in, as we were going into shutdown, and it was for me just amazing to see how the world was being divided and split. It has been for a long time, but just how quickly the tools of the internet and social media helped that division form, and how people could be living in two separate realities. Yeah. Right. My reality was different than your reality, and we both believed in the factual evidence of that side of things. And I thought that it would be really interesting and fun to write a story with that sort of concept from a different lens, right? Seeing the forest, instead of seeing the forest through the trees, right? Taking that step back and being able to kind of look at this from a different lens. And so, yeah, the magic book, one of the magic books, the main magic book, is kind of similar to the internet in the way that you can get information, but you don't necessarily know where that information comes from, or if it's 100% factual, and the impacts of that on society.
Yeah, I was I couldn't figure out if the Book of Truths was symbolic more of Google or something about Facebook in there, or kind of a combination of both. Um, and
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved how you made the BW, the book wizard, kind of like it was. She starts out, she's like a pop-up bookseller, and then as she accrues, well, she gets into a regular store and everything. It had that whole book selling vibe in it in the beginning of the story. And I thought you were spot on with the chaos and destruction that ensued when they started to split into these, first the blue and the orange, uh, uh, believing their own truth, so to speak.
Yeah.
Do you think story or fiction can influence change for the better?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that it's important to be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes, and I think fiction is a main way that we do that. Right? We all live in our little bubbles. We don't necessarily get to associate with all different walks of life and all different types of people with different views and beliefs and all of that. And so fiction, reading characters who think different things than you and believe different things than you and, live different lives than you do, can help you maybe form some empathy as a consumer of media. That's a really, important reason why I do what I do, why I write. I always want to try to have my stories be more than just something fun and entertaining, but have some deeper nugget of truth in there.
Yeah. What are you working on now?
Got a lot of short story irons in the fire. Hopefully, news soon on some things, but the original goal with writing for me was to write novels. I've got four kids, and I'd love to write middle grade science fiction or fantasy for them, and age that up over time, and kind of write for them as my audience, and eventually write into more adult genre. But as I started to understand the world of publishing, and the kind of the traditional publishing route is the only thing that'll work for me in terms of the time that I have to do that on the side. I realized I really, was only going to be able to do that if I could make a name for myself some way, and so short stories was a way for me to start getting something done, finish some stories, learn the craft of storytelling a little bit, hopefully make some professional sales. And so we're on the beginning stages of that now, and hopefully that'll lead to eventually some an agent after finishing a novel. So I've got novels started, need to get them finished, but
well, good.
Right now focusing on the short stories.
And what advice do you have for aspiring writers?
Yeah, well, write, read, and keep going. Wolf Moon, who's here, is kind of a mentor of mine that I wouldn't be here without his support, and without several of the people actually here who are part of our little writing group, who kind of helped keep me going when times were tough. I didn't necessarily struggle on my confidence level or my ability to, or my belief in my ability to get there, but when I was feeling like it was just, life was just a little too much of everything going on, had some support of people to encourage me to just put my head down and keep going. And I think that's what I would share for anyone who is writing. It's a thankless hobby. And it gets brutal sometimes. So just keep writing, enjoy it for what it is, and you'll get there.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, ZT. Nick, let's let's go to, tell us, I'm going to show his illustration. If you can, I don't know. This was for the short story Gallows. And if Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, your illustration and what,
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
The story Gallows was just sort of roughly about a guy who gets wrapped up in some time traveling stuff and ends up, associated with the FBI, trying to like solve the issue a little bit. So I was trying to figure out how to like represent that in sort of my artistic style. I tend to paint more big landscapes, and it was a very like character-oriented, character-driven story. So I was trying to focus more on like using the landscape to sort of tell some of the plot of the story, sort of visually, sort of figure out what was going on, sort of see some of the implications of what was going on through the illustration itself, rather than just trying to do it through.
Well, that's great, because I did not read the story, but I looked at your illustration and I thought, okay, there's an FBI agent and that looks like time travel there. So at least you got that across.
Yeah, and I was like trying to imply there's some implications about all the problems the time travelers might be causing. So that's why I put the big storm there to sort of imply future tension and issues and stuff like that, as well as throw in some stuff from the setting into the background as well.
What was the most difficult challenge in creating this drawing or this illustration?
It was mostly just figuring out how to show that sort of character-driven story through my more landscape sort of illustration stuff. So it was hard to get that first step of just figuring out the right sketch and the right way to represent the story that would actually work with how I paint. So that was the tough part.
And you said you use, what did it say?
Yeah, I mostly use Photoshop for painting.
Photoshop paint?
Yeah, so like Photoshop has like brushes.
Totally on your computer for this? I'm
totally on my computer for this. So if it looks painterly, that's because I'm using like paint brushes in Photoshop to do it.
Okay.
So it really is just like very similar to painting, just with a digital brush rather than a physical one. So there's no like photo manipulation or anything. It's all paint brushes in Photoshop.
Okay. Did you have any contact with the author in doing this illustration?
Not at all. Nope. You're not supposed to show them the illustration whatsoever. There's an art director for you, so the art director gives you all the feedback. So they're familiar with the story and they sort of walk you through it. So that's how, from what I understand, that's how a lot of more professional illustrations done these days, where there's not necessarily the artist talking directly to the artist for like the major publishers. It's the art director talks to the artist and the art director talks to the author, and it sort of goes back and forth that way.
Oh, okay. And what are you currently you're working on this book, The Sower?
Yeah, which is it's about a sort of an eldritch horror that invades the Midwest. So I'm doing a lot of big monster illustrations in sort of Midwest landscapes. And I'm going to be writing like little paragraph blurbs to go with most of the illustrations. So it's sort of going to be sort of little vignette sort of storytelling to go with each illustration.
And this is, what genre would this go into?
I'm not entirely sure. Sort of, horror, modern fantasy. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Do you have any advice for aspiring illustrators out there?
Just paint a little bit every day. You can burn out too fast if you spend too much time doing it. If you don't spend any time at all, you won't get anywhere. So it's really just take that at least an hour every day, half an hour, something like that, and just spend that painting if you can.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mike, why don't you tell us about your story and what led you to write it?
Yeah,
and
the story of the Squid
high
is my brother. What's that?
Were you teaching? You were teaching high school by that point.
Yes.
Yet This is set with a younger student than that, right?
This is true. Yeah. Yeah. So the Squid is my brother, which I can actually hang on. I'm going to do the thing. I have the convenient illustration right here that I can hold up, so that if anyone needs to know what we're envisioning, the Squid is my brother. Yeah, so it's set in an elementary school on Earth, of all places. And basically we have a student who grew up on a space station, and where everybody has alien symbiotes attached to their spines. It is in an environment where it's essential for survival and it's just the norm. And then when something dangerous is happening out there, her mother has gone off on some mission, nobody will tell her what's going on. She is sent as an exchange student to Earth. And the story involves what she goes through in that process and trying to adjust and figure out how to kind of find her feet on this new planet while having an alien symbiote attached to her spine. And any of the pitfalls you might assume would come with that. and the commentary in the book itself is that I like playing with things that are in the usually more horrific lens and wanting to place them in a way that can somehow seem endearing. In fact, when people are reading this one and my novel series, usually the disclaimers that come up or the content warnings that come up are like, by the way, there's going to be a charming alien that is attached to your spine and has tentacles. So if you're ooked out by that, be aware. And then with the other book, it's like, by the way, one of the alien species, the human's closest allies, are 4 foot tall uplift cockroaches. So if that's if that's something that I mean, I tend to write things that are going to be fairly appropriate for students, even if the reading level might be more for the new adult or the young adult. And in this case, I wrote the story because schools had just shut down and everyone was freaking out. Nobody knew what was going to happen. We were dealing with all of the stuff at the very beginning of the pandemic. This was April 2020. Yeah. And I was, interacting periodically with people at the school that I was at and then with some of like my tutoring clients, and everyone wanted to know what was going on and nobody really did. And everyone was scared and, making up whatever they could. And I was looking for a story that I could read that would give me some solace with this, that would deal with these kinds of issues and fears and still had some kind of uplifting ending. And I couldn't find it, so I wrote it. And that's what happens for me. Like if there's a story that I'm looking for that I can't find to read, I will write it.
So so it didn't really have to do with COVID, other than the fact that that's what created this atmosphere of fear and unknown.
Yeah.
Because it made me think about the immigrants' experience in our country. Were you thinking about that at all?
I'm not going to say that I was specifically thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Would it have possibly crossed my mind? Maybe. Yeah. So I have lived overseas as a student, and I'm second generation Greek American, and we have a lot of stories from the family about different cultural interactions back and forth. So these ideas and experiences are not out of my wheelhouse. It's just not necessarily something that I was actively planning through while writing the story.
Right. Right. I thought it was fascinating when she's writing, I don't know if she was thinking this or writing it in a letter, but where she talks, I know I've got a teacher for this class and this, there's no teacher for lunch.
No teacher for lunch.
I thought, yep. That is so right.
I'm worried I will fail lunch. There's no teacher for lunch. I'm not sure who sits where and what the rules are.
Exactly.
And I mean, like, incidentally, I was totally a kid who thought about things like that. I kept notebooks to try to detail like what I thought the different rules were in different social situations and on the playground. There are times when I can sound very, I'm going to say normal-ish when I'm talking in front of a group, but I had to keep a lot of notebooks to try to figure out, okay, this interaction means this thing when somebody's not really saying exactly what they mean. Because I was that kind of kid.
Well, my son was high functioning autistic. And yeah, I mean, I could see
Nope.
You feel like an alien sometimes in society. Why a squid?
Some of it does go back to that. Like, it's something that's usually feared. It's something that, like, tentacles coming out of weird places seems to be an element of cosmic horror. Like, you're going to see it in Lovecraftian stuff. And I'm like, all right, how do we make this endearing? It's just something that I like to play with and see if there's a way that I can reskin it so that I would read it to a child as a bedtime story. And if they didn't have the exposure saying that it was a bad or scary thing, that they could think of it as a charming thing.
Well, I think it worked. I didn't think of Brother as thought of him as brother by the end. I didn't feel him. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you working on now?
Ooh, that is a list. Yeah. So there's some amusing timeline stuff that happened in terms of like, shortly after the contest win was announced, I ended up having my trilogy picked up by a publisher. And then we did a rapid release of that. So I've had, the 3 novels come out December, January, and March. And the 4th one is in the chute, and it's coming out this October.
Well, good.
So 4th one in that space opera series. And the 5th one has been outlined, and I've gotten that approval on the team. Right now I'm working on a novel in another universe. I was invited to write in a series called The Four Horsemen Universe. It's a series that has about 80 books so far, and there's a number of authors to write in it. And I was invited to write a novel, so I wrote my treatment for that novel, sent it into the publisher and the editing team. They approved it. I'm working on that novel. So wow. I'm about 26,000 words into that one, and hoping to get a first draft turned in by the end of August. And that's one of the big ones. And then I've got other things lined up behind the scenes because I'm actually putting together an anthology. So my wife and I have been kind of laying the groundwork for being able to create sort of our own publishing line, because I have a lot of people that I've worked with in these overlapping communities. I'm going to mention Superstars Writing Seminars again. That's one of the groups that fosters a lot of new authors, and I want to put together a regular anthology series from those kinds of groups. Mm-hmm. So I'm taking stories for my first anthology. It started reading submissions, and we're going to have the Kickstarter and pre-sales going this September to line up based on the day that I get to Dragon Con. And so it's a list. The list is growing, but it's been a lot of fun.
You are busy.
I'm busy.
Okay. What advice do you have for those who want to get published?
I have a few things, but one of the big things that I'm gonna echo is the KJA advice, the Kevin J. Anderson advice. He has this spiel that he gives on what he calls the popcorn theory of success. And the idea is that, you don't know which one story you write is going to make it, right? You don't, like, if you spend all your time finding the one perfect kernel of popcorn, pop it in the pan, and then hope that it will, and then be wonderful, like, you'll starve. But if you take a whole bunch of kernels, everything that's even halfway decent idea, put it in the pan, some things that you never expected to pop will actually be excellent. Some things that you really thought were going to be perfect never go anywhere. So I'm somebody who likes to write a lot of stories and send them out everywhere. I believe in throwing a lot of darts. And if people ask about the quality versus quantity thing, I tend to lean on the side that the more quantity you produce, the more your quality improves, because you're doing practice every time with new stories.
Okay, thank you. Brittany, why don't you sum up your story a bit? Your story was, all 3 of these stories were very good. And they each had a different feel to them. Go ahead.
So my story is about a botanist, geneticist named Edry, who has to save the planet that humanity has moved on to and taken over before it also dies. She has to save this planet before they will do a forced evacuation, and she'll have to leave her daughter behind.
Okay, and we don't want to give a lot away. I don't know if I was the only one who read your story this way, but it came off to me as being pretty spiritual, I guess, is the way I would. You start off establishing that humans have found a way to be eternal in some way. And then later you introduce the gods into the story, which I won't talk. Did you mean for it to take that turn when you started writing? Because you were going to write a story about a mother and her child. I just wondered if that came during the writing or what.
I'm sure that just came during the writing, I guess. I mean, like I said, this the ideas that spawned this, and just thinking about life and stuff spawned after a dramatic health scare. And I think for me, I write, and I guess find things out about myself, or I think naming what you're scared of, or the things that when you put a piece of yourself out there, it makes the story better, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, tell us, you had this big health scare. Can you talk about that?
I I don't know how much I'm like, I mean, so for me, it was right after, I guess, a doctor stood across me and told me that they had removed what they thought was a polyp, and it was a rare kind of cancer, and they hadn't gotten all of it. And so they were going to have to go back. And yeah, it scared me, about, and it made me think a lot about my children, and, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I found your story very moving. The way, and the way the gods describe the dying season in this story made me think of how God in the Bible, wiped out the earth with most living things on the earth with a flood. And did you have that in your mind, that comparison, or if not, how is the flood different? I mean,
I guess at some point in my mind, I'd had this idea for a planet that, was almost an entity that would lure and trap. And so how would it do that? And so I guess that's kind of how that idea.
Okay.
I don't know,
You're going to have to read the story, those of you who haven't. You're going to know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What are you working on now? Because now you finally made your goal and you won the contest. So what's your next goal?
So currently I'm just trying to continue to write some short stories. I think I've fallen a bit in love with shorter stories. Most of my stories end up being novelette length or novella length. Unfortunately, I tend to write long, but yeah, I'm mostly just writing. I did find out just a little bit ago. I entered my Writers of the Future story, my 24-hour story, into the Baen Fantasy Adventure contest or whatever. And I found out I was a finalist for that. So
good. Congratulations.
Thank you. They'll announce in September, I think, if anything came of that. So.
Okay. And what would be your advice? Obviously, it's don't give up. But what would be your advice beyond that to aspiring writers?
My advice would be to surround yourself with good people. To me, that has helped me a lot with writing, because I'm like Zeet says, he never struggled with confidence or whatever. I do sometimes, and having a good support system, and also just having good critique partners, reliable people you can count on. Yeah, and also believe in you. To me, I think being surrounded by good people.
So you have a critique group?
I've had, some good critique partners, and yeah.
Okay. Do all of you, ZT, do you have a writers group or a critique group?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, Brittany and a couple other people, Chris Henkel and probably Crystal, I don't know if she's here anymore, but several people in this group actually read this story, my story in Writers of the Future before it won. And to be blunt, I wouldn't have been able to get to the point where I was writing at the level I needed to win without having people that, like Brittany said, surround yourself with good people. Yeah. Moon is kind of the catalyst of this. Wolf Moon there, helping to get us all together, and he gave us some valuable information and then the tools to work with each other. And I 100% echo what Brittany's saying.
He's my first two. I'll throw that out there.
Yeah. How about you, Mike? Do you have a group?
Kind in a manner of speaking. So I run a writer support group. It is very explicitly not a critique circle though, because the goal of the group that I run is about like we're going to be there with each other to like get the work done together, to commiserate, to swap ideas, but not in any sense that would shut anyone down from writing who's new to it. I've spent enough time with new writers who get that one critique that shuts them down for too long and they stop practicing. So I am not part of a critique group. I'm part of a couple writer support circles, and within those, there are some people that I'll contact to be first readers or to swap drafts. But I ended up going a different method. I discovered that when I was part of critique groups, some of us would end up circling, me included, would end up circling on the same story over and over and over again, not get anything new written, not send them out. So for my method and my process, writing many different things, having a couple of first readers, send something, and then, write the next one worked better for me.
Okay.
So still group, still community, but a different kind of thing.
Is your wife one of your first readers?
Yeah, my wife is one of my first readers. She reads, so there are a couple people through the Chris Kennedy Publishing Group who are on my initial reading team. My wife also reads very quickly. I appreciate that about her. So so she will go through, she'll go through my novels in advance as well. Yeah, but not always for short stories. I have some other people that'll send some of my short stories too.
I am looking to see if there's any questions in the chat. A link to buy the, I put it up at the top. I need to copy that.
I put a link directly to the book bungalow.
No. I don't want to do that. It's up at the top of the chat. The link to order the book. Oh, thank you. Someone else. Yeah. All right. Okay, here's a couple of questions. Here's a question from Valerie. Do you get feedback from judges when your story is not accepted or not a finalist?
You do if you're a semi-finalist.
What? Sorry, what?
Yeah.
You do get feedback from the judges if you're a semi-finalist. They will give you a letter afterwards and tell you what worked, what didn't.
But if you don't even become a semi-finalist, do you still get feedback?
Not personalized. It's just honorable mention, silver honorable mention.
Okay.
But that is one of the good things about the contest, though, is that there are very clear delineations. You can get rejected, but you could also get an honorable mention. You could get a silver honorable mention. There's different tiers, semi-finalists, finalists. So there are different tiers which can help you kind of gauge where you're at. And to jump in on what Mike was saying there, if you can write and have success without having some critique groups and circles, great. That's great. But Dave Farland used to talk a lot about blind spots, right? And we all have our blind spots. And for me, I just knew that I had blind spots that I wasn't aware of that I needed to fix. I needed to get better. And for me, having just a few people read, you don't want to have 20 people reading your stories and giving you comments, but having, a few trusted people read your story and give you some opinions, you can say, oh, this is where I need to fine tune this. And you get that same feedback over a few different stories, and you start to learn where your blind spots are, and you can fix them before you have to fix them for the next time.
And Wolf says in the chat, there's a new feedback list to help those that got close to honorable mention. And Cray Dimensional said they just added reject with comments. Yeah. So, okay. Anyway, are there any other questions out there? Put them in now. We've got 4 minutes left. I was gonna, while you're thinking of your questions, Zeets, who's your favorite top 3 authors that you read? You can all be thinking of this.
Yeah, my favorite at the moment is Sanderson. You know, I just think that the quality and quantity that he puts out is tremendous. You know, another decade of what he's putting out, and you know, he's going to be one of the most prolific of all time. And you know, this I think, in my opinion, the quality is great. So I like Sanderson. In terms of, you know, inspiration, I read as a kid, you know, grew up during the you know, the Harry Potter craze, so that was an inspiration for me. And you know, The Hobbit, Lord of the
Tolkien.
Rings,
Yeah,
Tolkien, of course.
While I'm on you, how do you balance writing? Darren Lippman wants to know, and I'm thinking about your job because you're working in finance. How do you balance writing with having a professional day job?
Very poorly. But you just do it when you can. Yeah, I mean, I truly get to the point every day where my brain is fried, and then I've got, you know, I go take care of the house and the family, and you know, very rarely do I have time at the end of the day to write. So this is another piece of advice for people: find what works for you. You know, you're going to hear so many people say write every day, and I heard that over and over, and then when I couldn't write every day, I got discouraged.
Yeah.
So for me, it was finding what worked for me, and what worked for me was building in my head throughout the week, and then when I could get a few hours here and there on the weekend, you know, plunking away for 3 hours at a time was what worked for me.
And Brittany, how do you give your kids? Well, you've got, how many kids do you have? You've got 4 girls and 1 boy. How do you do any writing at all? How do you give them time while sticking to your writing goals?
Oh, that's tough. But I kind of like you said, I'm still struggling right now to get back into a rhythm. I take notes and put them down as I can when I'm doing things, when I'm out and about. If I'm up in the middle of the night feeding the baby, I'll write something that came to me, you know. But yeah, I guess in bits and pieces, I can't write every day necessarily. I find those moments and try and write. And if I have an important goal or something that I want to meet, then I will make that happen. Whether I'm staying up in the middle of the night for a couple of nights or whatever, because that's just how to make it happen. That's what I do. Same thing with my kids. If my kids have something important, I can be there for them, you know, because that's important to me as well. So I guess it's kind of juggling. There was a lady, Nora Roberts, I think, did a quote where she was like, you're juggling balls. Some of them are glass, some of them are rubber, and you have to figure out how to catch glass balls drop. And that's not to say that your kids are glass, or it's the certain activities, you know, certain things that are happening that are important. You catch the glass balls.
Yeah. Mike, do you have kids?
I do not. So okay. I have students and I have a parrot, but no.
Well, students, yeah. Sometimes you feel like they're your kids.
Sure.
Who are your favorite authors?
It like that's going to be a long list. So Heinlein is going to be one of the big ones.
Who?
Heinlein is going to be one of the big ones for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really love the range of stuff from him. I think one of my first books that I read that really made me think like, wow, I want to do this. I want to give people this experience was Orphans of the Sky. It's short. It's like a 100-page novella. And it was just such an awesome ride. And like it made me think very wonderful questions and what ifs, and also was just super entertaining. So that's kind of like an ideal that I want to shoot for when I'm writing science fiction, especially sci-fi adventure. I'm very much a science fiction reader, so my list is pretty much going to be a long sci-fi list, but Heinlein's going to stay near the top or at the top at all times.
Okay. I'm supposed to ask Brittany, you once wrote a story for Writers of the Future at the hospital while you were delivering a baby. So tell us about that briefly, and that will be our last question.
Okay, I did with my fourth child. I had really wanted to make the goal of meeting my consecutive entries, and my baby was due at the end of September, which September 30th is the deadline, and I hadn't gotten a story yet. And I'm going into labor, and I'm looking at my laptop like, am I gonna have time to do that? And I just grabbed it and took it with me. And so after I delivered the baby and we're all snuggling and I have all this adrenaline, I wrote my story. And that story ended up actually being my first journalist story for Writers of the Future. I didn't have any time to critique. I just sent it out, you know, but I'm at my goal.
Good. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Mitch, for helping me put this together. And good luck in all of your future endeavors. If you get published, you always can do an event with me at the Book Bungalow, okay? Either virtually or in person. So reach out to me. And have a good evening, everyone. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Thanks.